the next tech industry city? Like, we sort of briefly mentioned it before, but Justin, you want to jump in on what you've got?
Yeah, so we thought it could be kind of fun to just do kind of top three tech cities right now. Take a look at the pros and cons of each of the ecosystem, and then maybe we'll give a little feedback on kind of our perception of some of those cities we lived in, others we haven't, but have maybe visited, and maybe give us some color there. So first, if you're thinking of kind of top tech cities, and again, this is just for the U.S. Obviously, there are other places around the world that have emerging talent and are really growing, but we wanted to focus this on the US. So the number one, San Francisco Bay Area, right? So what are some of the pros of the ecosystem? First, it's the strongest tech ecosystem. The Bay, including Silicon Valley, really remains a global tech hub, home to giants like Google, Apple, as well as countless startups, particularly in the AI space now. Just the high density of companies and professionals here really fosters innovation, has done it forever, and just tremendous networking opportunities. I can't tell you how many times I kind of walk down the street seeing other founders who, were in my space or investing luminaries, and people are just kind of out and about, and you can interact with them in a way that I haven't found in other places. The second piece is access to talent and capital, right? This is where the VCs are. This is where the talent is. This is where a lot of the primary universities that are getting funding exist as well. So you got Stanford, Berkeley. It just attracts talent from all around the world. And then, the VC funds this is where they're based. They may have other, satellite offices around the country and world, but this is kind of the primary home base. And then the other piece of, why this is, a great place is high salaries, right? So, tech workers, you can come here to the Bay Area, you can command the highest salaries. We'll get into some of the cons, which kind of combat against this a little bit, but, the compensation within this, in this network and demographic, and in this geography is the highest among the country, and in some ways you could probably say the world. So those are kind of three of the pros of why that's still a mainstay tech city. TW, you want to jump in the cons?
Yeah, I mean the cons. I think most of them are centered around cost of living. That's the biggest one. Is post COVID, especially. The costs incredibly high. You look outside of New York, it's San Francisco, right? Like the costs across the board. I've been here 25 years. It is just pricey. If you're gonna just up and move here, the rent and your overhead is expensive. Now you can save a little bit here and there, Costco and in other ways. There are ways to save, but if you're just looking overall, it's expensive, and everything around it is relatively expensive. Like gas is higher. We talked about rent. You talk about bridge tolls. You talk about the BART where we did that ad. I mean, I go to work every day, and it's $15 round trip. It's a lot every day. You're spending. I know people that actually take Uber to work, and they're spending $100 a day on travel just to get to the office on their commute. So that's a big piece of it. And then the next is crime. As a recent thing, is a real issue. They call it bipping here in the Bay, which is like you leave stuff in your car, somebody breaks the window, takes your stuff. That is alarming, for sure, and that has been on the rise.
Yeah.
That's a thing. I mean, they have their own language. Literally, they call it bipping, and kids and people are out there really, really doing it and at scale, like going around, and it's their job. They look for things in cars, and if there's anything in there, they break into it, take it. That is often something that people talk about as a reason not to come to the Bay. And the last one, and the biggest one for me personally, I don't know, I'd love to get your opinion on this.
Yeah.
Is overall sort of customer service in the Bay, I think is just lower than the rest of the country, because everyone feels like I got this startup, I should be making big money, and my day job is not important. I don't care about my day job because there's so many opportunities. People kind of mail it in. So, like I compare it to, I'm from Virginia. The guy that works at Lowe's, for example, takes a lot of pride in working at Lowe's. He knows where everything is. He knows where it's stocked. He knows his job really well. He's been doing it for a long time. In here, you in the Bay Area, you go to Lowe's and you're like, hey, I'm looking for screws. And they're just like, yeah, don't ask me. I just work here, man. Like, I'm waiting for my crypto to go up, and I'm out of here. Don't ask me. And that's the feeling you get. Like you just
Hmm.
don't know where to get help. You don't know how to walk around and figure. No one's there. No one cares about their job in these sort of like, I don't know what you want to call them, like blue collar jobs. To me, that's a real issue. Like restaurants as well. Like a lot of times you'll run into people that just don't care about their job, and then like it's slow and it's just frustrating. But like that's kind of part of the Bay Area. And then it has positive things, but like for me, that's a big one. What are your thoughts
I
on that, Justin?
Okay, Tito. So I am so excited to disagree with you on this topic, man. Maybe it's just because I'm from the East Coast, but and like the Northeast, Jersey, New York. These people there are the stankest people
Oh,
like
that's
in
fair.
the U.S.
That's
Man,
fair.
you go to a place and you ask for, you go to the local bodega, ask for a chopped cheese, man. Nobody want to make you food. Nobody really wants to be working there. It's a rat race. It's all about how can I retire as quickly as possible. People aren't, in my experience, like doing service jobs isn't something kind of people want to do, or isn't something that's kind of heralded as legitimate kind of job out there. So you have people who are just kind of sad and not want to do their job, and the weather is also not great. So for me, and I live in the East Bay, people are generally, my experience, people are very friendly. The people at the restaurants, they to me at least proceed to be kinder and like their jobs. When I go to my Home Depot, maybe it's just a Lowe's thing. I don't know, man. When I go to Home Depot, people are generally very friendly, and it doesn't seem like they're trying to run out of their job. So, and I think it's because they have access to nature and all the other things that aren't just about kind of the financial compensation. But it's really interesting to hear your different perspective on that coming from like Virginia. Maybe the South, maybe Charlotte's, maybe Virginia in the South is just a lot nicer. Um, than where I grew up, man. That was like a big incentive for me coming out to the Bay, was how much friendlier I
Yeah,
found
that's
people. So
fair.
man,
That's probably you're right. Like it's probably when I go to New York, yeah, are they more surly there? Absolutely, but I think the reputation there for me going to
hmm.
New York is that they're going to be that way. Whereas when I thought coming to sunny California, people would be nice and like helpful and people. I don't know. Maybe I had the wrong expectation, but like and maybe I'm talking about when I lived in San Francisco more. East Bay is definitely a little more similar to the East Coast in terms of like the South and Virginia, but in San Francisco itself it's tough. Like trying to get a plumber to come out and do run all of that extremely difficult. They do not want to be there, which for me was frustrating because it is more expensive too. Like I remember like wanting to run some wires in a apartment in San Francisco, and it was like $1,000, and the person showed up 3 hours late and could care less, and was like,
Oh
"Oh
man,
man,
I got to
um,
send you my list of
yeah,
vendors, man. I got this list.
yeah."
It's pretty
Apparently,
good of folks I work with. So
yeah, that could be it. Yeah, I mean those are mine, but I still love it here, so that tells you everything.
same here. I'm still here despite the high taxes and everything else. I think it's a
Yeah,
great
for
place to live.
sure. Despite
Uh,
what everyone says.
yeah. So let's jump into the Lone Star State, which has a city that's number 2 on our list, Austin, Texas. So, what are some of the pros there? Lower cost of living compared to a lot of traditional tech hubs. Austin really offers a more affordable cost of living. Although I imagine some people who are watching this may say that that's changing, but I don't think it's nearly the same as the Bay Area. How lowing housing prices, and also no state income tax. And there's another city on here that has that same thing that I think is really meaningful, particularly in terms of how much you're taking home. So I think it makes it pretty attractive for tech workers as well as companies that have been based here. The second, it's a really growing tech scene there. We've seen Austin rapidly grow as a tech hub. It's attracting a lot of major players there. Obviously, the big one is Tesla. You have Oracle. I think Meta has a bunch more offices there, alongside what is becoming more of a thriving startup culture. And I think that's created the foundation for a really good support system for tech professionals and entrepreneurs, and also quality of life. Great music scene, great food scene there as well. Kind of like the Bay Area, tremendous access to outdoor activities, so it creates like a really nice work-life balance, particularly for young tech workers who've come in. Have you spent any time in Austin, C-Dub? Have you
I have
been to
not.
the city
I
at all?
mean, I've had a couple of friends move there, after. COVID or during COVID.
Yeah.
So I've heard the cons is infrastructure one, like traffic is getting bad. The influx of people has made things pretty difficult to get around, and I think that's probably the thing I hear the most in terms of, hey, lots of people means I think there was a brownout at one point because the electricity wasn't enough.
Hmm.
Things like that. Rising cost of living also. Rents going up. All these people from California are moving in, and that creates
I know.
California problems, right? Like cost of
Yeah.
living
Yeah.
goes up. And I think the one thing you talked about, which was taxes, I think, while income tax is different, the property tax is very high
Oh
there.
yeah.
So if you
It is high.
buy, I think it's like 3 or 4% versus, half or 1% here. So like your property tax is definitely going to be higher, especially with costs going up in California. Residents going in there and being, thinking these houses are hotcakes and buying them left and right. Then
Yeah.
then the costs go up, and then your property tax goes up. And then the last one is tech maturity. You've got um in the Bay, you have all of the surrounding companies and people that have so much knowledge of how things have developed, where to grow, what to do next. Whereas the people there haven't been through it a lot, so they're it's all new to them. So they're probably growing pains that I've heard of there. That some of these tech companies will try to run more lean than they should, or overhire in some areas, and things that tech companies here in the Bay kind of have gone through so many times. They're new to the people in Austin, and there's sort of that rub, which is like, hey, in tech, this is how it's done, and then Austin's doing it a different way, and sometimes you kind of learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Have you heard
I think the
anything
other
else?
piece, yeah, I mean, I think the other piece, with Austin in particular is, especially if you're at like an earlier stage startup, the whole game right now is AI and AI
Yeah,
companies and access to technical talent and access to the latest innovations and thinking and people who are driving that. And those people are kind of in the Bay Area. And
yeah,
so if you're trying to get access to kind of the top new thinking or models or how the space is progressing, I think it's more difficult there. Obviously, you're closer to the Bay there than from some places on the East Coast, so you can definitely travel, but you're not going to have that kind of immediate access to the ecosystem in a way that you would have in Silicon Valley. Let's move to the last city on
yeah,
our list, and again, not a crazy exhaustive list, but we thought we'd pull our top three. And this is actually a place that I was the first place that I went in my career, which was Seattle, Washington. So,
yeah,
Washington, particularly Seattle, has had really strong tech roots for a long time. Obviously, it's home to Microsoft and Amazon, long-standing tech powerhouses, a lot of really tremendous technical talent there, and it's also really strong and established market and network. And typically what I found is people who spend their careers at Amazon and Microsoft, a lot of lifers there, and who can fund companies, when they pull together angel resources or just have a lot of great knowledge on what it takes to create thriving tech ecosystems. So definitely strong tech roots within Seattle. Also, really high quality of life, kind of similar to the theme of that we saw with Austin and Washington State. And I don't know how many of you will have visited out there. But, it's a little gray. We could talk about that and maybe the cons, but it's a really beautiful place. Probably in the summer, one of the most beautiful places in the country, in my opinion. Pretty mild climate, access to outdoor activities, which makes it really desirable, and a good balance there. And I think among all these cities, of kind of work-life balance. Obviously, it's going to depend on what stage you're at in terms of kind of the company, but generally, I think a pretty good work-life balance. And again, this is something that came up with Texas as well. No state income tax, man. I'll tell you, right out of undergrad when I was working at Microsoft, you felt it. And that was nice to be able to save some money and kind of live well out there as well. And so that's definitely an advantage, and particularly with tech folks who typically are more high come earners. What are some of the cons of Seattle? And maybe have you been there? I talked about living there. Have you spent
yeah.
some time in Seattle? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I was just there a month ago. I love Seattle. It's like, I know people hate hearing it, but it's like a mini San Francisco
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the vibe. But it is like a smaller, more condensed version, and with that comes higher cost of living, right? Like if you want to be downtown Seattle, there's not a ton of options, and the options are expensive. I mean, it's nice, it's convenient, it's all of those things, but it's can be pricey. So you got to move, outside of the city to get more reasonable prices. And then when you do that, there's traffic. So traffic in and out of the city is definitely growing, and it's I hear the complaints a lot when I go there of like I'm going to come in early or going to stay late because of the traffic, which not uncommon for any sort of bustling city, but something to be aware of for those that are thinking, no, I'm just going to move to Seattle. The last one is the weather. You talked about it. Rainy, like, there's this thing called seasonal affective disorder, SAD, which I think you've probably heard Kurt Cobain and some others will talk about the weather. It's always rainy. It messes with your emotions. Your vitamin D count is, I guess, a little lower. So
Yes.
yeah, that is like, I don't know how true that was for you when you were there, but
Oh, I could
I
definitely
was,
talk about that.
yeah,
So this
I
is
was
kind
there
of
for a
what,
week and it
yeah.
rained every day. I was there for a week last month and it rained every day for a little bit.
So Seattle has a lot to offer. I think like the food and music scene and even sports scene of the teams, RIP, the Supersonics and
They're coming
the
back.
teams that are left. Maybe they'll come back. But all that was great. But the weather was, you felt like you were in, a vampire movie every day.
Yeah.
You felt like you were in a Twilight movie a bit.
It's very gray.
And so, when I first moved out there, I was getting a doctor's appointment, etc. And the doctor was like, I had a new, primary care doctor out there. He said, for some of our kind of brown skin folks, we know you're kind of you're gonna have like a lack of vitamin D. So, you want to make sure you're really on top of that and taking care of yourself and making sure you're feeling good. I was like, oh man, what did I get myself into out here? But I did kind of feel it. Like the weather itself was pretty mild, but the grayness was rough.
Yeah.
The summer was amazing, but that time in between, like if there was just a random sunny day, literally the entire city was shut down. Everybody's outside,
Yeah,
taking advantage of it. But the pro was that because it was kind of rainy every day, no one really cared that much about the rain. Like you still went out to the bars and nightlife, etc. The rain didn't stop that, so that was definitely a cool part of the city as well.
When I was there last month, I will say the food incredible. And then on the tech side, the Amazon Go stores were there was a bunch of them. And for those of you who haven't been, you basically just scan your Amazon app, and then you just take what you want and walk out. It's pretty bizarre, but that's how it works. And that's like a very Seattle thing. That isn't it. They tried one here.
They tried. I thought they were shutting those down. I thought there was like a
Yeah.
big effort of shutting those down, especially SF, man. People can't act right out here, so I'm sure
Yeah,
they were
they can't.
taking advantage of that.
I mean, people still act like there's Amazon Go everywhere, so maybe it's still around. They're just not
right.
scanning
It's
any
just
apps.
it's just not branded that way. It's just you just take stuff. Although they changed some of the laws in California now, so we'll see how that impacts it with these measures that have passed.
No, those were great. And if I was going to mention some honorable mentions, Salt Lake City. I don't know if you've ever been there. Another beautiful place. I think people call it the Silicon Slopes because of the. I don't know. That's
Yeah,
take that for what it's worth.
I went there. I visited 4 of the 5 national parks with my wife and brother and sister-in-law. It was beautiful, beautiful place. Maybe lacking in diversity just a little bit, for me and my proclivities in
Yes.
terms of
100%.
having access to that. But people are super friendly, and again, another beautiful place. Seems to be the trend. People spending more time at home. They want to be around nature. I totally get it.
And then 2 other ones that almost made the list: Nashville, Tennessee, and Charlotte, North Carolina, both of which up and coming East Coast. I hear about them a lot. I don't know a ton, but if you're interested, leave a comment. We can dig into it. We can talk to some people who live there, and maybe come back with another list of Nashville and Charlotte. But yeah, those are the big up and coming cities. I'm excited to visit those and see what's up.